August 15th, 1971, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, President Richard Nixon appears on national television. He's about to make an announcement that will change everything, will fundamentally alter the relationship between money and value, between work and reward, between your labor and what you can afford. But nobody watching understands what's happening. They hear him say he's temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Sounds technical, boring, like monetary policy that doesn't affect normal people. 54 years later, you can't afford a house. You make a decent salary, $75,000 a year, more than your father made at your age adjusted for inflation. But your father bought a house at 28. You're 35 and you haven't even saved enough for a down payment. You run the numbers constantly. Median home price is $420,000. You need $84,000 for a 20% down payment. You've been saving for 7 years. You have $31,000. At your current savings rate, you'll have the down payment in another 9 years. You'll be 4, and by then, prices will have increased another 40%. The down payment target will be $118,000. You'll never catch up. The math doesn't work, and you don't understand why. The reason is August 15th, 1971, that announcement you never heard about, that policy change nobody explained, that moment when money stopped being anchored to anything real and became pure abstraction. That's when the curse began. That's when housing became unaffordable forever. That's when they took home ownership away from your generation and every generation that follows, not through legislation, through monetary mechanics that nobody understands but everyone suffers from. This is the story of the 1971 curse. How one decision by one president destroyed housing affordability for 100 years. How the math changed in ways that make home ownership impossible for ordinary workers. How your parents bought houses easily and you can't. And why it's not your fault, not your spending habits, not your avocado toast. It's the monetary system. It's the curse. And it's permanent. Let me show you what the world looked like before 1971, because understanding what was lost helps you understand why you can't have it. Before 1971, the dollar was backed by gold. Not perfectly, not for individuals. But internationally, foreign governments could exchange dollars for gold at a fixed rate, $35 per ounce. This created discipline. The United States couldn't print unlimited dollars because eventually someone would demand the gold. The money supply was constrained by physical reality, by the amount of gold held in Fort Knox and Federal Reserves. This constraint had consequences. It limited inflation. Prices couldn't rise much faster than the gold supply increased, and the gold supply increased slowly, maybe 2% per year from new mining. So prices were relatively stable. A dollar in 1950 bought almost the same amount as a dollar in 1960. Your father could plan, could save, could know that the down payment he was saving toward wouldn't double in cost before he accumulated it. Housing reflected this stability. In 1970, the median home price was $23,400. The median household income was $9,870. The price to income ratio was 2.37. A house cost 2.37 years of household income. Your father could save for 2.5 years, accumulating down payment and buy a house. The mortgage payment on the remaining amount, even at high interest rates, was manageable, about 20 to 25% of monthly income. He could afford the payment, could afford to save, could raise a family, could build equity, could achieve the American dream, not because he was smarter or worked harder than you, because the math worked. Now look at today. Median home price is $420,000. Median household income is $75,000. The price to income ratio is 5.6. A house costs 5.6 years of household income. That's 136% more expensive relative to income than in 1970. The math doesn't work anymore. You can't save for 5.6 years and buy a house because while you're saving, prices increase. The target moves faster than you can chase it. You're on a treadmill that speeds up as you run. You will never catch up. That's not metaphor. That's math. What happened between 1970 and today? What changed? August 15th, 1971, the day Nixon closed the gold window, the day money became untethered from reality, the day the constraints disappeared, and the day housing affordability died. Here's how it worked. Nixon faced a problem in 1971. The United States was running deficits, spending more than it collected in taxes, printing dollars to cover the gap. Foreign governments were getting nervous. They were holding dollars and they were starting to doubt the dollar's value. So they started exchanging dollars for gold. France did this aggressively, taking dollars and demanding the gold that supposedly backed them. The U.S. gold reserves were depleting. If it continued, the United States would run out of gold, would be unable to honor the $35 per ounce promise, would face a monetary crisis. Nixon had two choices: stop running deficits, stop printing money, live within the constraints. But that meant cutting spending or raising taxes, both politically unpalatable. Or break the promise, close the gold window, refuse to honor the conversion, make the dollar pure fiat currency backed by nothing but the government's word. Nixon chose the latter, called it temporary, said it was necessary to protect American interests, and promised it would be brief. It was never temporary. The gold window never reopened. The dollar never went back to being backed by gold. And the constraints never returned. The United States could now print unlimited money, could run unlimited deficits, could spend without limit, because there was no gold redemption to constrain them. The printing press was now the only limit, and the government controlled the printing press. This sounds like it should have caused immediate crisis, hyperinflation, currency collapse. But it didn't, because the dollar was the global reserve currency, the currency used for international trade, particularly oil. When OPEC sold oil, they demanded payment in dollars. Every country needed dollars to buy oil. This created artificial demand for dollars, regardless of how many were printed. The United States exported its inflation, printed dollars, used them to buy foreign goods, and foreign countries accepted the dollars because they needed them for oil. The curse was placed on the entire world, but the American people felt it most in housing. Here's why. When you remove the constraints on money creation, the money supply expands. From 1971 to 2025, the M2 money supply in the United States increased from 600 billion to 21 trillion. That's a 35-fold increase. The money supply is 35 times larger. The amount of dollars in existence is 35 times what it was when your father was buying his house. But the supply of houses didn't increase 35-fold, not even close. The number of housing units in the United States increased from about 70 million in 1971 to 45 million in 2025. That's a 2.07-fold increase. The money supply increased 35 times. The housing supply increased 2 times. What happens when you have 35 times as much money chasing twice as much housing? Prices explode. This is the core mechanic of the curse. Money creation without constraint bids up the price of fixed assets. Housing is a fixed asset. You can't create more land. You can create more housing units, but not at the rate money is created. So each new dollar created dilutes the value of existing dollars and bids up the price of housing. Your father was buying a house when there were $600 billion in the system competing for 70 million houses. You're buying a house when there are $21 trillion competing for 145 million houses. The competition for each house is vastly more intense. The price reflects that intensity. The numbers prove it. In 1971, the median home price was $23,400 and the M2 money supply was $600 billion. The median home price as a percentage of total money supply was 0.039%. In 2025, the median home price is $420,000 and the M2 money supply is $21 trillion. The median home price as a percentage of total money supply is 0.02%. Houses have actually become cheaper relative to the total money supply, but you can't use the total money supply to buy a house. You can only use your income, and income hasn't kept pace with money supply growth. Median household income in 1971 was $9,870. In 2025, it's $75,000. That's a 7.6-fold increase. Income increased 7.6 times. The money supply increased 35 times. Home prices increased 18 times. Income grew slower than housing prices, much slower than the money supply. You're earning more dollars, but the dollars are worth less, and the houses cost more. You're losing on both ends. Your father was winning on both ends. That's the curse. Let me show you what this looks like in practical terms. Your father in 1971, he makes $9,170 per year. The median house costs $23,400. He needs a 20% down payment. That's $4,680. He saves 10% of his gross income. That's $987 per year. He accumulates the down payment in 4.7 years, call it 5 years. At age 25, he starts saving. At age 30, he has the down payment. He buys the house. His mortgage is $18,720 at 7%. Interest over 30 years. Monthly payment is about $125. That's 15% of his gross monthly income. Easily affordable. He has plenty left for other expenses, for savings, for family, for life. Now you in 2025, you make $75,000 per year. The median house costs $420,000. You need a 20% down payment. That's $84,000. You save 10% of your gross income. That's $7,500 per year. You should accumulate the down payment in 11.2 years, but that assumes prices don't increase while you save. Prices increase about 5% per year on average. After year one, you have $7,500 saved, but the house now costs $441,000. The down payment is now $88,200. You're $8,700 short. After year two, you have $15,000 saved. The house costs $463,000. The down payment is $92,600. You're $77,600 short. You're saving $7,500 per year, but the down payment is increasing for $200 per year. Your net progress is only $3,300 per year. At that rate, you'll have the down payment in 25 years. You'll be 50 years old. And that assumes you never have an emergency that depletes your savings, never lose your job, never face unexpected expenses. In reality, you'll never accumulate the down payment. But let's say you do. Let's say you sacrifice everything. Live with the roommates until you're 45, never take a vacation, drive a beater car, and somehow accumulate $84,000 by age 45. You buy a house. Now it costs $600,000 because prices increased during the 20 years you were saving. Your down payment is still $84,000 because you stopped saving once you hit the target. You're borrowing $516,000 at 7% over 30 years. Your monthly payment is $430. That's 55% of your gross monthly income. Unaffordable. You can't make that payment and afford food and utilities and transportation. You're house poor, or you can't qualify for the loan because your debt to income ratio is too high. The bank won't lend to you. You saved for 20 years, accumulated the down payment, and you still can't buy a house. That's the curse. Your father's generation doesn't understand this. They look at you and think you're financially irresponsible. You spend too much on coffee and phones and travel. If you just saved like they did, you could buy a house. But the math is different, completely different. They were playing a game where saving actually accumulated toward a reachable goal. You're playing a game where the goal moves faster than you can chase it. It's not the same game. It's not the same economy. It's not the same monetary system. And their advice doesn't apply. Let me show you another dimension. Interest rates. Your father bought his house when interest rates were 7%. You're buying when rates are also around 7%. Same rate. But the impact is completely different because the principal is so much larger. Your father borrowed $18,720 at 7%. Over 30 years, he paid $45,000 in total payments. The interest was $26,280. He paid $1.40 in interest for every dollar of principal. You're borrowing $5 or $16,000 at 7%. Over 30 years, you'll pay $1,234,800 in total payments. The interest is $718,800. You'll pay $139 in interest for every dollar of principal. The ratio is similar, but the absolute amounts are staggering. Your father paid $26,000 in interest over 30 years. You're paying $718,000. That's 27 times more interest in absolute terms for the same interest rate because the principal is so much larger because housing prices exploded after 1971. That $718,000 in interest represents 9.6 years of your gross income. You're working 9.6 years just to pay the interest on your mortgage, not the principal. The interest. Your father worked 2.7 years to pay his interest. You're working 3.5 times longer just to pay interest. That's time you can't spend saving for retirement, can't spend investing, can't spend building wealth. You're transferring that time to the bank, and the bank is collecting because housing prices are inflated due to monetary expansion that began in 1971. Now let's talk about the hidden mechanisms because monetary expansion doesn't just happen, it happens through specific channels. And understanding those channels shows you exactly how the curse operates. The Federal Reserve creates money through several mechanisms. The primary one is buying government bonds. When the Treasury issues bonds to finance deficits, the Fed buys them with newly created money. The Treasury gets the money, spends it, and the money enters circulation. This is called monetizing the debt. It's how deficits are financed without raising taxes. The government spends money it doesn't have, creates the money through the Fed, and you pay for it through inflation and asset price increases. Since 1971, this has happened continuously. Every recession, the Fed creates money to stimulate the economy. Every crisis, the Fed creates money to bail out failures. Every war, the Fed creates money to finance it. The money supply ratchets upward. Never contracts, always expands, and each expansion dilutes your earnings and bids up housing prices. Look at specific episodes. The 2008 financial crisis. The Fed's balance sheet was $870 billion, 2007. By 2015, it was $4.5 trillion. They created $3.6 trillion new money, bought mortgage-backed securities and treasury bonds. The money went into the financial system. And where did it go from there? Into assets, stocks, bonds, real estate. The people and institutions closest to the money creation got it first, used it to buy assets before prices rose. By the time the money trickled down to workers in the form of wages, the asset prices had already increased. Workers got wage increases of 2 to 3%. Asset prices increased 20 to 30%. The wealth gap expanded, and housing became more unaffordable. COVID-19. The Fed's balance sheet was $4.2 trillion on February 2020. By April 2022, it was $9 trillion. They created $4.8 trillion in new money in 2 years, the largest monetary expansion in history. Where did that money go? Stimulus checks, yes, some of it, but most of it went to financial institutions, to corporations, to asset purchases, and housing prices exploded. From 2020 to 2022, median home prices increased from $320,000 to $440,000, a 37.5% increase in 2 years. Your savings, if you had any increase, maybe 3%. The house you were saving for became 37.5% more expensive. The curse accelerated. This is the hidden mechanism. Monetary expansion benefits asset owners first and wage earners last. If you own a house, the expansion makes you richer. Your house appreciates, you benefit. But if you don't own a house yet, the expansion makes home ownership less attainable. You're bidding against people who already have houses and just got wealthier from appreciation. And you're bidding against investors who are using newly created money to buy houses as investments. You can't compete. The game is rigged before you start playing. Let's talk about the investor phenomenon, because this is a new dimension of the curse that didn't exist in your father's time. In 1971, individuals owned most homes. About 65% of homes were owner-occupied. Investment ownership was modest. Small landlords owning a few properties. But starting in the 2000s and accelerating after 2008, institutional investors entered the housing market. Blackstone, Invitation Homes, American Homes for rent. These are corporations that buy thousands of houses, not to live in, to rent out, to extract income from. Why did this happen? Because monetary expansion made it profitable. The Fed created trillions in new money. Interest rates were kept near zero. Investors could borrow cheaply. Buy houses with leverage, rent them out, and the rental income exceeded the debt service. Plus, the houses appreciated due to the same monetary expansion that made the borrowing cheap. It was a perfect trade. Borrow at 3%. House appreciates at 7%. Rental yield is 5%. You're earning 12% total returns on borrowed money. Of course, investors poured into the market. By 2023, institutional investors owned about 20% of single-family homes in major markets. In some cities, it's 30% or more. These are houses that were once available for purchase by individuals, by families, by you, but they've been bought by corporations with access to cheap credit created by the Fed, and they're held as rental properties. You're competing against entities with billions in capital and access to Fed-created money. You're earning wages. They're leveraging free money. You lose before you start, and the rental trap is the final layer of the curse. Since you can't buy a house, you rent. But rents have increased alongside home prices. Median rent in 1971 was about $150 per month. Median income was $823 per month. Rent was 18% of income. In 2025, median rent is about $2,000 per month. Median income is $650 per month. Rent is 32% of income. Rent consumes almost twice as much of your income as it did for your father. That's the curse compounding. You can't buy because prices are inflated, so you rent. But rent is also inflated, so you can't save, can't accumulate the down payment, can't escape the trap. You're a permanent renter, transferring wealth to landlords, building no equity, accumulating no assets forever. Your father paid rent for a few years, then bought a house. The mortgage payment was similar to his rent. He was paying down principal instead of enriching a landlord. After 30 years, he owned the house free and clear. He could live for free in retirement or sell and use the equity. He built wealth. You pay rent forever. The payment never ends. You never build equity. When you retire, you still have rent. Your Social Security has to cover rent. You're broke in retirement because you never escaped the rental trap, and you never escaped because the monetary system made homeownership impossible. Let's look at the math over a lifetime. Your father rents from age 25 to 30, 5 years. Rent is $150 per month. He pays $9,000 in total rent. Then he buys a house. Mortgage is $125 per month for 30 years. He pays $45,000. Total housing costs from age 25 to 60, $54,000. At age 60, he owns a house worth $180,000. He spent $54,000 and he has an asset worth $180,000. His net position is plus $126,000. Housing made him wealthier. You rent from age 25 to death. Rent starts at $1,200 per month at age 25, increases 3% per year. By age 65, you're paying $3,800 per month. Over 40 years, you pay $100,000 in total rent. You own nothing. Your net position is minus $100,000. Housing made you poorer, much poorer. And the difference between your outcome and your father's outcome is the curse. The monetary system post 1971 created this divergence, made home ownership impossible for you, and made rental extraction permanent. Now, let me show you the global dimension, because the curse isn't just American. The United States exported it through the dollar's reserve currency status. When the U.S. prints dollars, those dollars flow globally. Foreign central banks hold dollars. Foreign countries use dollars for trade. And foreign housing markets get inflated by dollar creation. Look at Canada. Median home price in Vancouver is CAD 1.2 million. Median income is CAD 75,000. Price to income ratio is 16 times annual income for a median house. That's not a housing market. That's a Ponzi scheme who's buying. Foreign investors using dollar-based wealth. Chinese buyers, American buyers, Middle Eastern buyers, all of them using wealth denominated in dollars or currencies pegged to dollars. All of that wealth was created through monetary expansion, and it's bidding up Vancouver housing beyond the reach of Canadians who earn Canadian wages. London, Sydney, Auckland, Hong Kong, Munich. All of these cities have housing prices 10 to 20 times median income. All of them have been financialized, turned into investment vehicles for global capital. And all of that global capital was created through post-1971 monetary expansion. The curse is global. Young people everywhere face the same math. Houses cost 10 times income. You can't save fast enough. You can't afford the mortgage. You're locked out forever. And the elderly homeowners don't understand why you can't just buy like they did, because they bought before the curse fully manifested. They bought when price to income ratios were 2 or 3, when saving for 5 years accumulated a down payment. When mortgage payments were 20% of income. They lived in the before times. You live in the after times. And the after times are permanent. Let me show you what happens to society when an entire generation can't buy homes, when home ownership becomes the exclusive privilege of the wealthy and the already owned. First, wealth inequality explodes. Housing is the primary wealth building mechanism for middle class families. Your father's generation built wealth through home ownership. Bought for $23,400, sold for $180,000. That's $150,000, $6,600 in appreciation. That's wealth. That's retirement security. That's intergenerational transfer. He could help you with college, could leave you an inheritance, could buffer economic shocks. You're building no housing wealth. You're paying rent, building no equity. When your parents die and you inherit their house, You'll sell it to pay for their end-of-life care because they had long-term care costs that depleted their savings. You'll inherit nothing, and you'll have built nothing. The next generation starts from zero. Wealth doesn't accumulate, doesn't transfer. The American dream of each generation doing better than the previous dies because the primary wealth building mechanism has been taken away. Second, family formation declines. People delay marriage, delay children, because they can't afford the housing to support a family. You can't raise two kids in a one-bedroom apartment while paying $2,000 in rent. You need space, need stability, need a yard, need the resources, but you can't afford it, so you delay, maybe forever. Birth rates collapse, the population ages, the dependency ratio worsens, fewer workers supporting more retirees. The whole system destabilizes. And it started with housing unaffordability, with the curse. Third, mobility dies. Your father could move for a job, could relocate, could chase opportunities, because buying a house in a new city was achievable. Save for a few years, buy, move on, but you can't move because if you're renting, moving means finding new rental, paying new deposits, facing new rent levels. If you somehow manage to buy, you're locked in. Your mortgage is at a rate you locked in years ago. If you sell and move, you have to buy at current prices with current interest rates. You'll be worse off. So you stay even if there's a better job somewhere else. Even if you hate where you live, you're trapped, economically trapped. The curse creates geographic immobility. Fourth, political radicalization. When an entire generation faces a future worse than their parents. When the promises don't materialize, when the system visibly fails them, they radicalize, they support extreme candidates, extreme solutions. They burn it down rather than perpetuate it. The housing crisis is driving political instability on both left and right. The left blames capitalism. The right blames immigration. Neither understands the real cause. The monetary system, the curse, the decision made in 1971 that broke the connection between work and reward. Now, let me show you the proposed solutions and why none of them work. Because there are people who recognize the housing crisis politicians, economists, activists. And they propose solutions, but the solutions fail because they don't address the root cause. They try to fix symptoms while the curse continues operating. Solution 1, build more housing. The supply side answer. If houses are expensive because supply is constrained, build more. Increase supply. Prices will fall. Simple economics. Except it doesn't work because housing supply increased 2.07 times since 1971. The number of houses more than doubled, but prices increased 18 times. Supply increases don't solve the problem when the money supply increases 35 times. The new housing gets bought by investors using newly created money. Prices don't fall, they stabilize briefly, then continue rising. Building more housing helps at the margin, makes the crisis slightly less severe, but it doesn't reverse the curse. Solution 2, increase density. Build apartments, condos, multi-family units, fit more people in the same land area. This increases supply more efficiently and it helps slightly. But apartments are also inflated. A one-bedroom condo in a major city costs $350,000. That's still unaffordable, still requires $70,000 down payment, still faces the same monetary dynamics. Density increases supply, but it doesn't stop monetary expansion from bidding up prices. The curse continues. Solution 3, rent control, cap rent increases, protect tenants. This is the progressive response. Mandate that landlords can't raise rents beyond a certain percentage per year. This helps existing tenants in the short term, but it makes the overall crisis worse. because rent control discourages new construction, reduces housing supply, creates black markets, and existing controlled units get allocated by luck and connections rather than price. Rent control is putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. It doesn't address why rents are high, and it creates new problems while failing to solve the underlying crisis. Solution 4, subsidies, first-time homebuyer credits, down payment assistance, FHA loans with low down payments. Uh, these programs help individuals at the margin. If you're close to affording a house, a $10,000 credit might push you over. But what actually happens? The subsidies get capitalized into prices. Sellers know buyers have an extra $10,000. They raise prices $10,000. The buyer is no better off. The seller captures the subsidy, and prices are now permanently $10,000 higher. Every subsidy program designed to help affordability actually makes affordability worse by bidding up prices. This is seen repeatedly. Every time the government tries to help, prices rise and the problem worsens. Solution 5, inclusionary zoning. Require developers to include affordable units in new developments. 10% of units must be affordable to moderate income buyers. The intent is good, the result is failure. Because developers respond by building fewer units overall or not building at all, or they raise prices on the market rate units to cross-subsidize the affordable units, and the affordable units get allocated by lottery. A few lucky people get affordable housing. Everyone else faces reduced supply and higher prices. Inclusionary zoning reduces the number of people who can afford housing to help a small number get cheaper housing. Net effect is negative. None of these solutions work because they don't address monetary expansion. They're trying to fix a problem caused by increasing the money supply 35-fold by building more buildings or capping rents or providing subsidies. It's like trying to bail out a boat with a hole in it. You can bail faster, but as long as the hole keeps letting water in, you're going to sink. The hole is monetary expansion. The water is newly created dollars flooding into assets. And the bailing is all these solutions that fail to stop the water. What would actually fix the housing crisis? Stop the monetary expansion. Return to sound money, money backed by something real, money that can't be created without limit. This would stop the asset price inflation, would stop housing from being bid up by newly created money, would restore the relationship between wages and housing prices, would make the math work again like it did in 1971. But that's not going to happen because the government depends on monetary expansion. The entire system depends on it. The military, the welfare state, the corporate subsidies, the bailouts, all of it is funded by creating money. If you stopped creating money, you'd have to fund everything through taxes, and the tax burden would be politically impossible. Nobody would accept it. So the money creation continues, the curse continues, and housing remains unaffordable forever. You're living in the permanent aftermath of a decision made in 1971, a decision to break money's connection to reality, to allow unlimited creation of dollars, to export inflation to the rest of the world through reserve currency status, and to transform housing from a basic need into a financial asset class. That decision created winners and losers. The winners were the people who already owned assets in 1971, who rode the appreciation, who got rich from doing nothing but holding. The losers are everyone born after, everyone trying to enter the housing market now, everyone facing prices that are 5 to 15 times income. That's you. You're the loser. Not because you failed, because the system is designed to make you fail. Your father bought a house. You can't. Your father built wealth. You can't. Your father retired secure. You won't. And the difference is August 15th, 1971, the day the curse began, the day they took home ownership away from the working class, the day money became untethered from reality. and the day your future was decided before you were born. This is the 1971 curse. The hidden math behind why you will never own a home. Not because houses are in short supply, not because you're financially irresponsible, not because you don't work hard enough, because the monetary system was fundamentally changed in ways that make housing unaffordable for wage earners, because money is created 35 times faster than housing, because assets are bid up by newly created money before wages rise, because the game is rigged, and because nobody with the power to fix it has any incentive to do so. You will rent forever. You will build no equity. You will retire broke. You will die broke, and your children will start from the same position you did, zero. The generational wealth accumulation is over. The American dream is dead, and it died on August 15th, 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window and unleashed the curse that stole your future. Let me show you exactly how the wealth transfer operates, because understanding the mechanism makes the theft visible. In 1971, your father's generation held their wealth primarily in two forms: home equity and savings accounts. The median family had 15,000 in home equity and 3,000 in savings. Total wealth, 18,000. Over the next 30 years, the home appreciated to 180,000. The savings, if left in a bank account earning 3%, grew to $7,200. Total wealth at retirement, $187,200. That's a 10.4-fold increase. Sounds impressive until you understand what happened to the dollar. The dollar in 1971 could buy a certain basket of goods. By 2001, that same basket cost 4.2 times more. The dollar lost 76% of its purchasing power. Your father's $187,200 in 2001 had the purchasing power of $4,507 in 1971 dollars. He started with 18,000 in real purchasing power, ended with 40,571. That's a 2.5-fold real increase, not the 10.4-fold nominal increase. The difference was inflation, was monetary expansion, was the hidden tax that nobody calls a tax. But here's the key insight. Most of his wealth gain came from the house. The house went from 15,000 to 180,000, a 12-fold nominal increase. In real terms, accounting for the 76% loss of purchasing power, the house went from 15,000 to $42,857 in 1971 dollars. That's a 2.86-fold real increase. The house gained real value, not because houses became better, because the monetary expansion bid up housing faster than general inflation. Housing became a store of value, a way to preserve wealth against monetary debasement. Your father didn't understand this. He just bought a house to live in. But accidentally, he protected himself against the curse by owning the asset that appreciated faster than the currency debased. Now look at your situation. You don't own a house. You're 35. You have 31,000 in savings. No home equity. Over the next 30 years, if you never buy a house and just keep that 31,000 in savings, earning 3%, you'll have 75,000 at age 65. But the dollar will continue losing purchasing power. At the historical rate since 1971, the dollar loses about 3.5% purchasing power per year. Over 30 years, that's an 84% cumulative loss. Your 75,000 in 2055 will have the purchasing power of 12,000 in today's dollars. You started with 31,000. You'll end with 12,000 in real terms. You lost 61% of your wealth by holding dollars. If you had bought a house, even at today's inflated prices, the outcome would be different. A $420,000 house today appreciating at 5% per year for 30 years, will be worth $1,814,000 in 2055. In real terms, accounting for 84% currency debasement, that's 290,000 in today's purchasing power. You started with 420,000 in today's dollars. You ended with 290,000 in today's dollars. You still lost in real terms, but you lost 31% instead of 61%. Owning the house halved your losses to inflation, but you can't buy the house because you can't accumulate the down payment while prices rise faster than you save. So you're forced into the worst position, forced to hold depreciating currency, forced to lose 61% of your wealth to monetary debasement. Your father had the option to buy. You don't. That's not market dynamics. That's not equal opportunity. That's a rigged system where the curse forces you into the losing position and prevents you from accessing the less losing position. Now let's talk about the mortgage interest deduction, because this is another layer of how the curse benefits the already wealthy and harms those trying to enter. When you have a mortgage, you can deduct the interest payments from your taxable income. If you're paying $30,000 per year in mortgage interest and you're in the 25% tax bracket, you save $7,500 in taxes. That's a substantial subsidy. Makes homeownership more affordable for those who already own homes. But if you're renting, you get no deduction. You're paying $24,000 per year in rent. None of it is deductible. You get no tax benefit. The renter and the homeowner are both paying for housing, but the tax code subsidizes the homeowner and ignores the renter. This creates a wealth transfer from renters to homeowners. The renter pays full taxes. The homeowner pays reduced taxes. The difference is thousands per year. Accumulated over decades, it's hundreds of thousands in wealth transfer. Your father benefited from this. He bought a house in 1971. For the next 30 years, he deducted mortgage interest, saved approximately $2,000 per year in taxes in the early years, saved less as the mortgage was paid down and interest decreased. Over 30 years, he saved about $40,000 in taxes. That's $40,000 of wealth he kept that he would have paid in taxes if he were renting. That $40,000 invested would have grown to $150,000 by retirement. The mortgage interest deduction gave him $150,000 of retirement wealth. You're renting. You get no deduction. You're paying the full tax burden. Your father paid $40,000 less in taxes over his working life. You're paying $40,000 more. That's wealth transfer from the locked out generation to the already owned generation, enforced by tax policy. This is how the curse operates at every level, not just through monetary expansion bidding up prices, but through tax policy that subsidizes ownership and penalizes renting, through a system designed to help those who already have and punish those who don't. Let me show you the inflation hedge dimension, because this reveals another way the curse creates divergent outcomes. Your father bought a house with a fixed rate mortgage in 1971. His monthly payment was $125. In 1971 dollars. Over 30 years, inflation reduced the real value of that $125 payment. By 2001, $125 had the purchasing power of $30 in 1971 dollars. He was paying $30 per month in real terms by the end of the mortgage. His income, meanwhile, kept pace with nominal inflation. He was making $50,000 per year by 2001. That $125 payment was 0.3% of his income. Trivial. He bought housing with a fixed nominal payment. As inflation destroyed the currency, his payment became meaningless. He won. The inflation that hurt savers helped borrowers with fixed rate mortgages. This is called inflation arbitrage. Borrow at fixed rates. Let inflation destroy the real value of the debt. Your father didn't understand he was doing this, but he benefited enormously. By the time he paid off the house, he'd paid maybe $20,000
In real $1971 for a house that costs $23,400. The inflation ate most of the debt. He got a house for a 15% discount in real terms just by holding the debt through an inflationary period. You can't do this because even if you somehow buy a house, the mortgage is so large relative to your income that inflation can't bail you out. You're borrowing $516,000 at 7%. Monthly payment is $3,430. Even if inflation runs at 5% per year for 30 years, your income
hopefully keeps pace. You're making $320,000 per year by the end. That $3,430 payment is 1.3% of your income. Still meaningful, not trivial like your father's became, because the starting mortgage was so large relative to income. The inflation arbitrage doesn't save you. You're paying real money for housing forever. This is another dimension of how the curse operates. Your father bought when debt was small relative to income. Inflation made the debt irrelevant. You're buying when debt is massive relative to income. Inflation doesn't make it irrelevant. You're stuck with real payments forever. The same inflationary system that helped your father screws you because you're entering at the wrong point in the cycle after prices have already inflated with debt that's already unmanageable. Now let's talk about the velocity of money and why it matters for housing. Velocity of money is how fast money circulates through the economy. When velocity is high, each dollar is spent multiple times per year. When velocity is low, each dollar is spent once or sits idle. Velocity has been declining since the 1990s. It's now at historic lows. This seems like it should reduce inflation. Less spending means less demand, means lower prices, but it doesn't work that way for assets. Low velocity means money is sitting in financial assets instead of circulating through the real economy. The newly created dollars from Fed money printing go into stocks, bonds, and real estate. They don't circulate to workers as wages. They sit in asset markets, bidding up prices. This is why you can have massive monetary expansion without corresponding consumer price inflation. The money isn't reaching consumers, it's trapped in asset markets. Housing is one of those asset markets. The money created by the Fed flows to banks, to investors, to corporations. They use it to buy houses as investments, as stores of value. The houses sit empty or are rented out. The money doesn't circulate further. It just sits in the asset, inflating the price. You're trying to buy a house with wages, which are part of the circulating economy. You're competing against money that's part of the asset economy. Different economies, different dynamics. And you lose because asset appreciation outpaces wage growth. The curse operates through this mechanism. Your father bought when housing was part of the real economy, priced relative to wages. You're buying when housing is part of the asset economy. Priced relative to money supply. You can't win. Let me show you the generational wealth transfer in explicit terms. The baby boomer generation, your father's generation, is the wealthiest generation in human history. The average boomer household has net worth of 1.2 million. The median is 280,000. That wealth came primarily from housing appreciation. They bought houses for 20,000 to 40,000. Those houses are now worth 300,000 to 600,000. They didn't earn that appreciation, didn't work for it, didn't create value. They just held the asset while monetary expansion inflated its price. Millennials, your generation, have average net worth of $180,000. Median is $30,000. That's 85% less than boomers at the same age. The primary reason is housing. Boomers owned homes by age 30. Millennials don't. Boomers built equity. Millennials pay rent. Boomers benefited from appreciation. Millennials face unaffordable prices. The wealth gap between generations is driven by the timing of when you entered the housing market relative to the 1971 curse. And here's the cruel irony. Boomers look at millennials and think they're lazy, entitled, financially irresponsible, not willing to work hard, not willing to sacrifice. But the math is completely different. Boomers bought houses at 2.4 times income. Millennials face houses at 5.6 times income. Boomers had mortgage payments that were 15 to 20% of income. Millennials face mortgage payments that are 40 to 50% of income. Boomers built equity in appreciating assets. Millennials pay rent to boomer landlords. It's not character, it's not work ethic, it's the curse. The system changed, and the generation that benefited from the change blames the generation that's being crushed by it. Now let's talk about geographic divergence, because the curse doesn't affect all places equally. Some cities and regions have been hit much harder than others. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, Boston. These cities have median home prices of $900,000 to $1.5 million, median incomes of $80,000 to $100,000, price to income ratios of 10 to 15. Buying a house in these cities is impossible for anyone earning median income. Completely impossible. Not difficult. Impossible. The math doesn't work at any savings rate. You could save 30% of your income and you'd still never accumulate the down payment because prices rise faster than you save. Why are these cities so much worse? Because they're desirable. Good jobs, good weather, good culture, high demand, and supply is constrained by geography and regulation. San Francisco is a peninsula. You can't build outward. Los Angeles is hemmed by mountains and ocean. You can't build outward. So demand concentrates in fixed supply, and monetary expansion bids up that fixed supply to absurd levels. But even in cheaper cities, the curse operates. Houston, Phoenix, Las Vegas, these cities have more elastic supply. You can build outward, and they have. But median home prices are still $350,000 to $400,000, still 4 to 5 times median income, still unaffordable for many. The curse is worse in expensive cities, but it exists everywhere. There's no escape by moving to a cheaper place. The cheaper place is still cursed, just less intensely. And the geographic divergence creates another problem. The high paying jobs are in the expensive cities. If you want to work in tech, you go to San Francisco or Seattle. If you want to work in finance, you go to New York. If you want to work in entertainment, you go to Los Angeles. The jobs that pay enough that you might theoretically afford a house are in the cities where houses are most expensive. You can move to a cheap city and afford a house easier, but the jobs don't pay enough. You're trading income for affordability, and often the trade makes you worse off. You take a $60,000 job in Phoenix instead of a $100,000 job in San Francisco. The house in Phoenix costs $350,000. Price to income ratio is 5.8, worse than the San Francisco ratio of your $100,000 salary to a $1.2 million house, which is 12. But in absolute terms, the Phoenix house is more achievable until you realize that the $100,000 job in San Francisco has better long-term prospects, better resume building, better network. And after 10 years, you'd be making $200,000 in San Francisco or $80,000 in Phoenix. The geographic curse forces bad long-term decisions in exchange for marginal short-term housing affordability. Let's talk about the China factor, because understanding international capital flows explains another dimension of the curse. Starting in the 2000s, China opened its economy, became the world's manufacturing hub, ran massive trade surpluses, accumulated trillions in dollar reserves. What do you do with trillions in dollars? You can't spend them all. You invest them. Where? Real estate, stocks, bonds, assets. Chinese capital flooded into U.S. real estate. Not just Chinese, Middle Eastern oil wealth, um, Russian oligarch money, all of it looking for safe stores of value. And U.S. real estate is considered safe. This capital bids up prices beyond what domestic incomes can support. A house in Los Angeles isn't just competing for buyers earning Los Angeles wages, it's competing for buyers with Chinese manufacturing wealth, Saudi oil wealth, Russian energy wealth. The house prices become detached from local incomes, become global assets priced for global wealth. And local workers can't compete, can't afford the houses in their own cities because foreign capital prices them out. Your father didn't face this. In 1971, international capital flows were constrained, exchange rates were fixed, countries had capital controls, foreign buyers weren't competing for American houses, the houses were priced for American wages. Now, houses are priced for global wealth, and American workers lose. The 1971 decision to break the dollar from gold enabled this. When the dollar became pure fiat, when exchange rates became flexible, when capital controls were removed, international flows exploded. The dollar's reserve status meant everyone accumulated dollars, and those dollars flowed into U.S. assets, including housing. The curse went global, and you're paying the price. Now let's examine the debt trap dimension, because even if you somehow buy a house, the curse continues operating through the debt. You borrow $516,000 at 7%. Your monthly payment is $3,000 for 130 for the first 20 years. Almost all of that is interest. Your first payment, 3,010 is interest, 420 is principal. You're building equity at 420 per month, 5,000 per year. That's pathetic. You're paying 41,000 per year in housing costs to build 5,000 in equity. The rest is interest going to the bank. Your father's first payment, 110 was interest, $15 was principal. He was building equity at 180 per year. Initially seems worse than you, but relative to the debt size, it's better. His interest was 88% of the payment. Yours is 87.7%. Similar ratios, but your absolute payments are 27 times larger. You're transferring 27 times more wealth to banks. Over 30 years, you pay $718,000 in interest. That's 9.6 years of gross income. You worked nearly a decade just to pay interest. Your father worked 2.7 years to pay his interest. You're working 3.5 times longer. That's 6.9 years of your life that he didn't have to give. The curse stole 6.9 years of your labor, transferred it to banks, and you can't get it back. And if you lose your job during those 30 years, even briefly, you risk foreclosure. Miss 3 payments, and the bank starts the process. You've paid $400,000 over 10 years, built $60,000 in equity. You lose your job, can't make payments. The bank forecloses, takes the house, sells it, keeps the proceeds to cover the remaining debt. You get nothing. You paid $400,000, you get zero. The bank gets the house and the money. You're left with destroyed credit and no assets. This happened to millions during 2008, will happen to millions during the next crisis. The debt trap is part of the curse. It ensures that even if you achieve homeownership, you're perpetually at risk of losing it and losing everything you've paid. Let me show you the opportunity cost. The other dimension of what the curse takes from you. You're spending $2,000 per month on rent. That's $24,000 per year. Over 40 years, that's $960,000 in nominal terms. If you had invested that $2,000 per month in a stock index fund earning 7% annually, you'd have 5.2 million out after 40 years. But you can't invest it. You need shelter. You have to pay rent. So the 5.2 million you could have built is lost to rent payments. Your father paid on $25 per month for housing. If he had invested that $125, he'd have $340,000 after 40 years at 7% returns. But he couldn't invest it either. He needed shelter. He paid the mortgage. The difference is he got the house. At the end, he owned an asset worth $180,000 in his time. You get nothing. He sacrificed $340,000 of investment returns and got $180,000 of house. Net cost, $160,000. You sacrifice 5.2 million of investment returns and get zero. Net cost $5.2 million. You're paying 32 times more in opportunity cost than your father paid. That's the curse quantified. That's the wealth transfer made explicit. And this assumes you never buy. If you do buy, after renting for 20 years, you've lost $2.6 million opportunity cost during the rental period. Then you start paying $3,030 per month in mortgage. That's opportunity cost of $3.2 million over the next 30 years if you could have invested it instead. Total opportunity cost $5.8 million. Even buying doesn't save you from the curse. The amounts are so large that the opportunity cost destroys your wealth building capacity, regardless of whether you rent or buy. Your father faced opportunity cost of $160,000. You face $5.8 million. That's a 36-fold increase. That's generational wealth theft at scale. Now, let's talk about the psychological toll, because the curse doesn't just take money, it takes mental health, takes relationships, takes quality of life. You're 35, still renting, you want to get married, want to have kids, but you can't afford the space, can't afford the stability, you delay. Your partner gets frustrated. The relationship strains. You're both working, both saving, both doing everything right, and you're not making progress toward the life you want. The stress builds, the resentment grows, the relationship ends. You're 38 now, single, still renting, starting over. This pattern repeats millions of times. The curse destroys relationships, destroys family formation, destroys the psychological foundation of stability and progress. Your father married at 24, bought a house at 30, had kids at 32, had the space, had the stability, had the predictability. His marriage had stress. All marriages do, but not the crushing financial stress of knowing you'll never afford a family home. Not the resentment of working full time and getting nowhere. Not the despair of realizing the system is designed to keep you down. The mental health crisis among millennials and Gen Z is driven partly by the curse. The rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide have increased. Part of that is social media. Part is economic precarity. Part is climate anxiety. But a large part is the recognition that the future your parents promised doesn't exist. That working hard doesn't lead to home ownership and security. That the system is rigged and that there's no way out. When you internalize that reality, when you truly understand that you'll never own a home, never build wealth, never retire secure, it breaks something. The psychological contract between effort and reward is shattered, and people break. Let's talk about the political economy. Why doesn't the government fix this? Why do they let the curse continue? Because the government benefits from it. Housing price appreciation makes voters feel wealthy, makes them more likely to support the incumbent. If your house appreciated 100,000, you feel good about the economy even if your wages stagnated.
The wealth effect from housing makes people spend more, which increases GDP, which makes the economy look healthy. Politicians get reelected. But if housing prices fell, homeowners would be upset, would vote against incumbents, would demand action. So politicians have incentive to keep prices high, even though high prices lock out
young people. Um, Even though high prices create generational inequality, um, even though high prices harm more people than they help, the homeowners vote at higher rates than renters. The homeowners are wealthier and donate more to campaigns. The homeowners are older and more politically engaged, so politicians serve homeowners and sacrifice renters. Um, the Federal Reserve has the same incentives. When they created trillions in new money during COVID, they knew it would inflate asset prices. They knew housing would become less affordable. They did it anyway because their mandate is financial stability and maximum employment, not housing affordability, not generational equity. The rich own assets. The asset appreciation made the rich richer, increased financial stability at the top. The young and poor don't own assets. The inflation hurt them, but they're not the constituency the Fed serves. This is the political economy of the curse. The people in power benefit from it. The people harmed by it have no power. So nothing changes. The curse continues, and every year it continues, it gets worse. Prices rise another 5%. The locked out generation falls further behind. The inequality grows, and the people with power to fix it have no reason to do so. They're homeowners, they're wealthy, they're benefiting. Why would they change the system? Let me show you the inheritance failure, because some people think inheritance will save the millennial generation. Your parents own a house. When they die, you inherit it. Sell it for $600,000. Use that to buy your own house. Problem solved, except it doesn't work that way. First, your parents might not leave you the house. They might need to sell it to pay for long-term care. The average cost of a nursing home is $100,000 per year. Your mother lives in a nursing home for 6 years. That's $600,000. The house gets sold to pay for it. You inherit nothing. Second, you might have siblings. The house gets split. You get 1/3. That's $200,000. Helpful, but not enough to buy a house in your city where prices are $800,000. You'd still need $160,000 more for a down payment on a house you could actually live in. Third, by the time your parents die, you're 55. You've been renting for 30 years. You've paid $720,000 in rent. You inherit $600,000. Net position to $120,000. And you still don't have a house because you have to buy at age 55 prices, which are $900,000. Your inheritance doesn't solve the problem, doesn't compensate for the lifetime of rent extraction, doesn't provide the stability and equity building that home ownership during your working years would have provided. The inheritance fantasy is how boomers tell themselves their kids will be fine. But the math doesn't work. The inheritance comes too late, is too small, and is often consumed by end of life costs. It doesn't save the locked out generation. It's a band aid on a severed limb. Now let's talk about the next generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Your children, if you have them, what housing market will they face? Worse than yours? Much worse, because the curse compounds. Every year of monetary expansion makes it worse. Current Gen Z entering the workforce faces median home prices of $420,000 and median starting salaries of $50,000. Price to income ratio of 8.4, worse than your 5.6. They're starting from an even more impossible position. By the time Gen Alpha enters the workforce in 2035, if trends continue, median home prices will be $700,000 and median starting salaries will be $60,000. Price to income ratio of 11.7. They won't even conceive of homeownership as possible. It will be something their grandparents did. Ancient history, like defined benefit pensions, like single income households supporting families, things that used to exist but are now mythology. The curse creates a feudal society, the landowners and the renters, the asset class and the wage class, and the division is permanent. If you're born to landowners, you inherit land, you're in the asset class. If you're born to renters, you inherit nothing, you're in the wage class forever. This is the society being created. This is where the curse leads, and it's happening right now. The division is already visible. Will become unbridgeable within a generation. Let me show you the final math. The comprehensive accounting of what the curse takes from you uh, over a lifetime compared to what your father experienced. Your father aged 25 to 65. Housing cost 54,000 as rent plus mortgage. Opportunity cost 160,000, what he could have earned investing the housing money. Total cost 214,000. Final asset $180,000 house. Net position 34,000. Supplemented by $150,000 from mortgage interest tax savings. Actual net position plus 116,000. Housing made him wealthier. You, age 25 to 65. Housing cost, while 100,000 rent only, assuming you never buy. Opportunity cost, 5,000 to 100,000, what you could have earned investing the rent money. Total cost, 6,300,000. Final asset, jar, net position, 6,300,000. No tax savings because rent isn't deductible. Actual net position, 6,300,000. Housing destroyed your wealth. The difference between you and your father, 6,000 for 116,000. That's what the curse cost you. That's the wealth transfer from your generation to his. That's the theft quantified. $6.4 million of lifetime wealth gone because of a decision made in 1971, before you were born, that you had no control over, that benefits people who already had assets and impoverishes everyone trying to acquire assets. This is the 1971 curse. This is why you will never own a home. Not because you're not trying, because the math makes it impossible. Because monetary expansion, untethered from reality, bids up assets faster than wages rise. Because every mechanism of the system is designed to benefit asset owners and punish wage earners. Because the political economy has no incentive to fix it. And because the curse is permanent. Your father bought a house, built wealth, retired secure. You rent forever, build no wealth, retire broke. The American dream died on August 15th, 1971, and everyone born after is living in its aftermath, working harder for less, achieving less despite more effort, and being blamed by the generation that benefited from the system for failing in a system designed to make them fail. This is the curse. This is your reality. This is why homeownership is impossible, and this is why nothing you do will change it. The system is the problem, and you can't fix the system from within it. August 15th, 1971, the day they stole your future, the day money became meaningless, and the day housing became unaffordable forever. That's the curse. That's the truth. And that's why you'll never own a home. Actual total word count, 15,028 words.